Hey YouTube, this is the 13th episode of the Ukrainian Mercenary series, which is being done in conjunction with the other podcasts on this channel, books, social media, and a whole lot more for Ashley Oosthuizen, who continues to suffer a life sentence inside of a Thai prison that she was given at only 21 years old. So if you have not already subscribed, then please do, because she continues to be the only reason why I am making these videos now, and why I was in Ukraine in the first place, fighting a war where people were being killed so that I could get my beloved onto CNN, where we are still propelling her. So please add your drop, click subscribe. The last episode was after the boondoggle that left Zeb dead. Unfortunately, JT, our squad leader, he was done. He was no more. Gary, he was gone. Mitch was gone. Hogan was on the way out. And so we were back at the orphanage for less than a week. While we were there, we went and did some live fire exercises at a really nice gun range. Nice as in very free, open in the countryside. You could do all sorts of maneuver, tactical drills. It was really cool to be able to go out there and do that. And we also had a lot of new gear, tactical equipment and things like thermal scopes and such that were sighted while we were out there as well. And so another thing that occurred before we went back out is that Seth Hart from Rolling Stone reached out to me as well, or replied back to me in regards to Ashley and then the story, but he was really interested in what had happened with Steven, and so I started a correspondence with him, because again, the only reason I was in Ukraine in the first place was to publicize Ashley, and so Rolling Stone magazine taking an interest was a pretty big deal. And it was probably a Thursday or so when orders came from Kenny that Vitaly wanted us to be ready to move back out the next day. The other time at the orphanage, right, that we were there, I mean, if we weren't at the gun range and we weren't just hanging out in the rooms, which the guys did it a lot, there were the scheduled meals 3 times a day that the Ukrainian women so wondrously provided for us. We would also do group classes up in the dance studio with the rocket launchers, like the Javelins and the In-Laws, and all sorts of different rockets. And so we would, with ourselves and Sparta Group, have demonstrations and go through mock drills and all these different things to sort of be training at the orphanage while we weren't at the front. But it wasn't very long that time before we were told again, once Zeb's body and the other guys, JT and Gary, were all sorted, we were sent back out. We were going to be sent back out to the silo. And so Kenny relayed those orders and told us that we were going to be moving out the next day, and that was that. And so the next day we did move out. I rode in an SUV with George, and there was a Lithuanian guy with me and a German guy, and it was a beautiful day. As we rode, I talked to George, this Ukrainian gentleman, whom, I should say, rest in peace, gave his life for his country. He's no longer with us anymore. But at this time, George, a very nice fellow who spoke very good English, he was driving, had a conversation about the war and what he was doing. He was 7 years in the admin side of things, sort of with the military, and then once the invasion happened, then he was wanting to do more and get actually out there and start handling business, as it were. And so we talked about that and had a conversation on the way to the silo, the same silo that we had been to before, but this time as we approached, we stopped because there was a lot of smoke and fire that was coming out of that area because it was under an artillery barrage. And so we pulled underneath, like we were just on the road, and then we basically drove off of the road into the woods, right? We drove into the wood line. Not enough to get the vehicle stuck, but enough that they were into the woods. Not the big trees, but the small trees were run over. And so we parked there ourselves. There were 2 SUVs and then another big truck, one of those big military trucks that has all of the equipment and stuff inside. And so we held out there. I actually got out and I was looking around into the forest. Very beautiful, so beautiful, vibrantly green, summertime, just exquisite, jumping out at you everywhere, every which way. And the Lithuanian couldn't speak really good English, so he didn't try and speak with me. But the German guy, he from Sparta Group, these guys were from Sparta because they were going out with us as well. He did try and speak with me, but I didn't really like speaking to people very much when I was there for multiple reasons. he wasn't in my squad, number one. Number two, you know, people were in and out, dying, getting killed, injured, leaving, whatever it was. And so it just seemed like a waste of energy to try to know anyone that you weren't going to be actively working with. Like to make small talk, you know, so... But anyway, just sort of living vicariously, letting you know what happened. And so we, as soldiers do, we had a convo. Fast forward. We eventually got the radio call. George did on the radio that we could continue going into the silo that we had been at before. And this time, as we drove up, it was deserted. It was completely unmanned, where before there had been people at the gates and at the front. You could actually see personnel. This time, you could see nothing except tremendous plumes of smoke, fire, debris, wreckage. As we drove in, the tops of buildings were collapsed onto themselves. The one, like a carport where a mechanic shop was, that was still had a roof over its head, is where the two SUVs, us, myself, and then the one that had Vitaly behind us, we drove in there. The big military vehicle stayed outside on the roadside. It did not drive in. It stayed on the roadside. And we went undercover so that there was, again, nothing that the drones could see for the artillery to continue striking after the barrage had ended. And so we drove into this building that was, you know, in the middle of an oasis of destruction, and we got out of the vehicles, and we were looking around, and again, it's just this factory before, which had been old and derelict, but otherwise, you know, workable, clean, was now just smoldering ruins and wreck. It had been the sighting of repeated Russian bombardments since we had been gone only the 3 or 4 days previous. And so George and Vitaly, being the Ukrainian commanders, they got together and decided that they were going to walk, again, billowing clouds of smoke passing over the asphalt, that they were going to walk to the Ukrainian high command and then basically come back and tell us what to do. So they told us to wait there, and those two walked off, disappearing into the smoke of the firing building. There was another building that had been directly hit by the artillery shells, and it was still actively on fire. And so again, just like a sandstorm of smoke, basically. And after 15-20 meters, Vitaly and George couldn't see him anymore. They were completely gone. Even though it was the middle of the afternoon, sun, blue sky, they were completely gone into the smoke. We lost them. And so the rest of us stayed there in this wrecked out compound, looking around, debris, everything, just like Armageddon happened. You know, something like explosions everywhere. Not actively, but had just occurred. And so it was just complete destruction. And so we were sitting there, talking, as it were, Rich and I, and that German, I can't remember his name, for 20 or 30 minutes until Vitaly and George came back through the smoke, told us to get into the vehicles. At that point, we drove through that smoking wreckage, over past where we had been before, that silo building. We didn't stay in that anymore. Instead, we went to where the Ukrainian actual high command was, in the building behind that. Our two SUVs and the large military truck. We all three moved into there very quickly, and then immediately hopped out and started to human convoy all of the military and equipment and supplies and personnel inside of this great behemoth of a building, inside of the stairwell. Rocket launchers, crates of ammunition, grenades, all of this stuff, gear, medical supplies, all of this stuff, in, quick. And so we get it all in, and then of course, as soon as we do, the drivers, they take off. Those of us that are inside, we have to start taking the gear. And so now we're in another type of building. This one isn't like the last silo. This one is some sort of, I don't know what it is. It's a stairwell that goes down into the earth. And then there's all of these turrets or silos that are off of this hallway, as you'll see in this video. And it's pitch black. There's basically no light except at the end of the tunnels where the daylight comes in at. And because the whole place had been recently shelled and continues to be shelled from this point on, there's tremendous smoke clouds that are billowing across and going down into these subterranean layers, making it like a smoke box of carcinogens, of stuff that is going to cause terrible things, right? And so immediately I had to wrap two t-shirts, thick green, the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, t-shirts around my face like a mask, and I had to wear those 24/7. I didn't have to. I chose to wear them 24/7, except if I was actively eating or drinking something, because of how much smoke was billowing down into the subterranean, blacked out place that we were now going to be living in. And so, you know, once we got there, we're going down into this place. As you'll see, walking down, Dom and I, as always, we roomed together in some turret that was just nothing, you know, but we were able to salvage because the Ukrainians had been using it for weeks, or who knows how long. And so we were able to go around and salvage all of these different parts of equipment, these beds, what have you, beds, springs, you know, and bring them into these turrets that were pitch black in the daytime or at nighttime, and even in the daytime only lit through slivers of light. And this was our subterranean lair that we were now into to stay until whatever the mission was happened. And so we moved into the subterranean lair, and you couldn't go outside because of the constant artillery shelling. And so I did go outside during breaks in the shelling to catch a glimmer of sunlight, and also to collect pieces of wood, like debris and wood, because in some of the other silos that were just abandoned, that no people were sleeping in or were using for shit houses or for refuse piles, they were just empty basically. In one of those, I set up like a fire pit so that we could start making like a fire basically inside of this great big grand empty silo, this concrete silo, right? It was pitch black otherwise, so that during the daytime there would be like light. And so that's what I would do. I would run out and collect wood, and then I set up stumps and seats and stuff, and put stones, and made this fire pit inside of the silo, because what else are you going to do, right? I mean, you're just there. They tell you they're there. Okay, here's the turret that you're going to be in, and then you're just there. It's just wait. Okay, you're just waiting. You don't know who you're waiting on, what you're waiting on, how long you're waiting. You just know that you're in a subterranean lair that's pitch black. You can't go outside. It's smoky as hell. There's constant artillery going on all around you. And so what are you supposed to do? You know, I mean, if you're Dom, I don't know how he did it, but Dom just lays there. He just gets in his bed, and he just lays there. And that's all he does. Seriously. I mean, it'll be like 4 hours, 6. I don't know how the guy can sleep like that. It's literally a form of hibernation. It's very impressive. But myself, I could not do that, okay? So it's like after you arrange everything, you try and clean up, you try and do this, you try and do that. It's like, what do you do? What do you do? You're just staring, and then I'm thinking of Ashley, so it's like I have to keep busy because I just go crazy. And so that's what I did. I risked my life to go out and get pieces of debris and firewood so that I could have a fire, and then that brought everyone together inside of this subterranean lair. And so we started to have a fire there. Rich and Matt and Nibs and Kenny and people from Sparta, they would all come in and join, and we would sit around in there and just, you know, cook Polish sausages over this indoor fire, talking about all sorts of hoo-ha, who knows what. Who was in the Boy Scouts, what are the Boy Scouts, I mean, just everything. All sorts of mundane things that you're just sitting there with these basic strangers under the ground, you know, waiting to hear whatever the operation is that's going to take you into harm's way again, because you're there in the middle of Ukraine fighting against the Russian Empire, trying to propel my lovely Ashley Oosthuizen to where people will know her so that she doesn't spend her whole life inside of a miserable hellhole. It's just like, God, man, this is the situation I'm in. This is what I'm doing. And so I was there. We were there for a whole day, I know, because that first night, so again, like nighttime, it's just those red beam lights on the headlamps. That's all you got. That's not true. Okay, clutch. So another thing I did, I scavenged, right? I scavenged like a little muskrat, going through all of these old, unoccupied, used to be occupied turrets, silos, whatever. I went through everything. I found things like chairs, which are incredibly useful, obviously, but you know what the most clutch thing was? Seriously? An almost unused candle, like one of those large candles that will burn for days. So clutch. So I brought that back, and we were the only room, except for the actual Ukrainian commander, who had light in their, I mean, candle light, but still actual light inside of our like silo turret thing that we were living in. Like, like dwellers. Who are those people in the Lord of the Rings? The miners, the dwarves, like dwarves, living like dwarves, man. And so we were in there doing our thing like that. And that first night, I remember there was another artillery bombardment because it was literally, it felt like the earth was being destroyed, ripped up right around you. Really, it was right outside, but we were just under the ground. And so the whole earth was violently shaking, stuff coming off the walls, dust, debris. Kenny's coming down the lines. Get ready, mate. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Stuff like that. You know, we have our candlelight. We're suiting up. We don't know if it's like preemptive of some sort of Russian attack or if it's just like a heavy shelling. You know, boom, boom, boom. Like this. I'm just sitting down there, and honestly, at this point, no fear at all. Actually, at this, and I'm just telling you what it is. Okay, for me, how I experienced it, it was an excitement. It was an excitement. I felt safe. I felt perfectly safe. You know, those shells, however big they were, 105, 100, even 120, whatever, millimeter. Where we were at, I mean, it's just like there were... If the Russians shot a missile, we would be screwed, like a bunker buster. But the artillery, I felt safe. So it was like, wow, I am sitting here in an artillery bombardment. Like, this is something, you know? I mean, this is like you live, right? You have one life in this universe, and so you try to experience all of these different things. And so this was the night that I got to experience what it was like to be in an actual artillery bombardment, you know? And so that was what that was. I mean, like right outside, boom, boom, ripping it up. And so that went on for not so long, 15 or 20 minutes. And then it was just more incessant boredom, just living subterranean like dwarves, sitting in the fire pit, trying, you know, hours. Finally, while we were in the fire room, in the fire pit, which was actually next to Dom and I's room, then Kenny and Matt came with word from the Ukrainian high command of what the next mission was. And so now we're inside this silo, right? There's not a fire present, but it is the fire pit, and there's a bunch of people from Sparta team, the guy Fogel, I can't remember the other people's names, Munden, whatever, and then there's all of our guys. And so now we're all there, and we've been there for 2, maybe 3 days. It's hard to keep track, and we're now going to hear what the mission is. Like, what's the mission that they want us to do? Okay, and so Matt and Kenny, they're, you know, the ones that were in with the Ukrainians, and now they're coming to give it to us. And so they take out the map. We're in there, they put the flashlights on, they put the map on the floor, and Kenny starts to sort of give it with Matt. And I'm not going to try and do the accents because I'm not good enough at it, but it's super thick, you know. I might that right, you know, like this. And so they start giving us what it is, okay? And so paraphrasing, obviously, as we're all standing around, and they told us. Matt came in because I was in bed, Dom was in bed. It was early in the morning. That's right. It was before 8, probably before 7 o'clock, maybe before 8, and said, hey, there's going to be a briefing in like 5 minutes. You know, guys, come over. And so Dom and I, we got up, we got dressed, same with everyone else. Then we went into the fire pit room, and then we were listening to this briefing that went paraphrasing sort of like this, which was like, okay, so the Ukrainians, they are going to drop us off tomorrow. George is going to go with us. Vitaly is going to drop us off northwest of Doroshenka, the same village, always Doroshenka. But this time we're going a whole different way. Before we had always been going from the south. Now we're going from the northwest of Doroshenka. Okay? And so there's this map, and Matt's, or Kenny, is pointing to it, and he's like, so we're going to get dropped off here, okay? And then George is going to lead us through, and he's showing us, which you'll see on the map, into this position in the hedgerows where there's already been Ukrainians there. Like, there's already Ukrainians there. This is just the briefing, okay? And once we get there, okay, then the Ukrainians who have been dug in there, whoever they are, they've been there for however long, I don't know, they're going to take us from there, okay, following this route to this graveyard, like these woods outside near a graveyard, outside about 2 kilometers from the northwest part of Doroshenko, okay? And we are going to find a suitable spot, obviously being careful for booby traps. This is all going to be untested territory, and establish an observation post for 48 hours. They want us to establish an observation post that is within sight of the northern end of this village of Doroshenko. And so far, you know, it's like, okay, like I'm with it. But then, you know, they're telling us, Matt and Kenny, like, you know, this mission's crazy, what they want us to do. It's going to get crazy. And so we're waiting to hear it. And so, okay. And now it starts getting crazy. They're like, okay, well, during that those two days, right, it's going to be us, the 7 guys that are left, myself, Dom, Rich, Nibs, Kenny, Matt, maybe I'm missing some guy. Oh, Hogan's not going, right? But we'll get to that. So we are going to go and establish this observation post. And during that 48 hours, right, there'll be people watching the town. There'll be a team constantly clearing a route of mines through the hedgerow, the 2 kilometers that separate our observation post to the actual town of Doroshenko. Okay? Then, once we have established our observation post and we have conducted a route of safe passage into the town of Doroshenko, okay, at that point, after the 2 days, okay, then we are to, as a squad, move from our observation post into the northwest part of Doroshenko. We have been assured by the Russian-Ukrainian High Command that this part of the town is abandoned and not occupied. The Ukrainians want for us to occupy these 2 buildings at the front part of Doroshenko. They want for us to hold these locations until one of the Russian patrols, which usually, they told us, consists of 2 men, come up this direction in patrol of this part of the village. This is where it gets crazy if it hasn't already been crazy to this point. At this time, the Ukrainians want for us, once this patrol has made it to where basically our buildings are that we're occupying, that they don't know that we're occupying, we are to rush out, surprise attack them, eliminate all of them except 1, okay? And then we are to take this prisoner that we have just captured in this surprise attack back the 2 kilometers to the observation post, and then back another 3 or 4 kilometers to the extraction point without getting everybody killed or the Russian killed or anything like that. Okay, so that is the mission. We are to establish an OP, make a route of infiltration to the town, occupy the first 2 buildings of the town, wait for the enemy patrol, attack the enemy patrol, kill the enemy patrol, capture one of the enemy patrol, go back to the observation post with that prisoner, and then extract out further to the extraction point with the prisoner so that the Ukrainian High Command can determine where the minefields are. Because, as you've seen, if you follow the Ukrainian war, a huge issue is the minefields. And so the feeling was the Ukrainians High Command, the reason they wanted this prisoner so badly is so they could learn the intelligence of where the minefields were. Because remember, we're working for the Ukrainian intelligence, the GRU, I think it was. We weren't under the regular army, which again is probably why we were doing really special forces missions. This is like a special force mission, right? I felt like it was a special force mission. So I'm sitting there listening to this, and Dom's like, Cordova, you know, like, fuck is this, you know, like, it's crazy, but I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know, free Ashley, here I am, hey Ashley, I'm here for you, babe. And so I'm like, okay. And then this guy Fogel from Sparta, he's like, okay, well, what are we supposed to be doing during all this? And then Matt's like, you guys, Sparta and Hogan, because Hogan had decided firmly, finally, that after this mission, he was going to go home, right? Mitch decided before, so he left, but Hogan pussyfooted around and came with us for another mission that he didn't want to go out on, but he was really going to go home this time. And so he, with Sparta team, were going to be our support. Now get this, oh my God, stay with me, right? They were going to be our support. And so then Matt and Kenny, they start showing us on the map where they're going to be at on like this on the map, which is probably 2 to 2.5 kilometers from our position. Okay, and so basically they say that once we do the surprise attack on the Russian patrol, obviously, like, the Russians are going to know that some shit's happening because there's going to be a firefight. And so there's not going to be a lot. It's going to be immediate. Like, once we attack this Russian patrol, that's it. Like, shit has hit the fan at that point. It is balls to the wall from that point on. And so as we're extracting, like, our diversion, our support, as it were, is going to be these guys, Sparta and Hogan, 2 to 2.5 kilometers away with an automatic grenade launcher. And so they're going to be lobbing in automatic grenades behind us to basically prevent the Russians from following us and to just keep them pinned down, you know, like what the hell's going on, we're not really sure, and to give us basically time to extract the prisoner. And so then I had to speak up, right? I mean, come on, people. Come on, people. I'm like, wait. Look at the map. Look at the map. There's a hedgerow right here. So, first of all, I was in the Marine Corps Infantry as an assaultman with an M16A4 with an M203 grenade launcher, which was good to 350, 400 meters, if my memory serves correct. So I could launch grenades from my rifle at about 350 to 400 meters. It was about the max, if I'm remembering correctly, okay? So, first of all, Hogan and the Sparta guys, they're literally at least 2,000 meters away. 2,000 meters away. And there's a fucking hedgerow separating them from us. They can't even see us, man. They can't even see us. So basically our support fire, our indirect support fire, are these guys shooting an automatic grenade launcher from 2 kilometers away at targets they cannot even see. And so then I looked at Hogan. I'm like, Hogan, have you ever shot an automatic grenade launcher before? And he's like, no. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, man. You know? Like, okay, yeah, well, this is gonna go great. You know? This is the stuff, man. This is the stuff that they got us doing. So obviously I don't have enough time to go into the mission that we did. We went on this mission. But I'll do that next week. So please, if you have, I mean, all of this stuff, man, I'm doing for Ashley, just to get her publicity, attention, and support. I'm out here living in these subterranean, smoked out dungeons, caves, not dungeons, she lives in a dungeon, I was living in a cave, being told these ridiculous missions that were led by people that believed that the earth was flat. For love. If that's not worth you clicking a subscribe button, then I'd say you are too difficult. We'll see you next week. Free Ashley.